All right, so here we're going to cover chapter 3, which talks about intercultural communication within interpersonal communication. So, more than a half a century ago, Marshall McLuhan kind of coined a metaphor that says the world is a global village. What does this mean to you? The world is a global village. Well, McLuhan suggested that just like a traditional village, all of our affairs are intertwined with each other, whether that's good or bad. Here in the States, I think we can see that the term global village is definitely pretty accurate for our society. This chapter, we're going to learn a couple learning objectives. Go ahead and look through those if you need to identify what you should be pulling out of here. This PowerPoint is not going to cover everything. These PowerPoints should supplement your reading and your material. So I'm going to highlight some of the important things, and of course, I definitely suggest at least reading, scanning through the chapter, identifying things that you want to dig in a little deeper with. Right, so we're going to talk about what culture and communication is. And first, we have to determine what is culture. Well, culture is a collection, right? And it includes your language, the values, beliefs, traditions, customs, and this is all things that you share or learn through the people that you are closest with the people that you connect with, the group that you feel like you belong. That is culture. So, the definition of culture is somewhat a matter of perception. It's a matter of definition because if you identify yourself as a member of a culture, you need to recognize yourself and others within your group as sharing certain characteristics. But you also have to see that there are others who do not share those same characteristics. And those become your in groups and your out groups. Now, an in group are just groups of people with whom you identify. Doesn't mean the cool people, it doesn't mean anything other than these are just people that you identify with. This is the group that you feel like you share with, the culture with. Now, an out group is simply a group that you don't share those common things. You see things differently, and that's okay. Now, cultural membership will contribute to all of our social identities. Right? We learn from from the people around us how to behave in certain situations, how to react, how to handle ourselves, how to speak the language, how to use that language properly, how to walk, talk, act. All of this kind of helps who we are. And this is part of the self concept. And the self concept, this one is based on the membership of your groups. And so the question, who are you, might include social categories such as your ethnicity, your nationality, different things like that. But what is a co-culture then? Well, if a culture is all about sharing the language, the values, the beliefs, the traditions and customs, then co-culture is also the same thing. But the co-cultures are a subgroup that are within a bigger group, i.e., the the culture of America includes many co-cultures. Things such as age can be a different co-culture, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, nationality, even geographic region, southern states, Midwest, East, West, all of those. Maybe disabilities, religions, activities, different things that you do, video gaming, different motorcycle clubs, car clubs, those things. Those are co-cultures. Those are smaller groups within the larger group, and at the same time, you're sharing language, beliefs, and values that are unique to the smaller group, but all of that smaller group also encompasses that larger group above it, the big culture. An example of co-culture uh, developing their own patterns of communication, we can look at the deaf culture. They share um, signing and different nonverbal cues. They seem to connect pretty pretty significantly through that that challenge of not hearing and having to approach the world in a different manner. Now, co-cultural theory suggests that when somebody from a non-dominant group is trying to communicate and interact with members of the dominant group in the culture, there's pretty much three primary strategies to approach these situations. The first one is assimilation, or blending in with the dominant culture. This would be, for example, if a woman is working in construction field industry, she might behave as one of the guys just to kind of, look, I'm getting along, I'm getting the job done, I'm just one of you, I'm adapting to how you do things. Accommodation is the second way or second strategy to um, face the challenges of interacting with someone in a dominant group. And accommodation is fitting into the dominant culture and doing what is quote unquote expected of you, but still maintaining your own identity. Let's say, for instance, uh, the construction worker woman who is going to work every day, she's still maintaining her woman uh, the standards that you would maybe associate with other women. She's still proud to be um, clean and well kept and not using the same language and all of that. But at work, she can blend and be one of the quote unquote guys out there in the construction industry or construction field, but still maintain the identity that she feels most connected with. Another example that might make more sense, the book says that a Muslim woman who proudly wears a hijab on the job would fit this description. A third option is separation, and this is just preserving the group's identity um, that is distinct from the main culture. Right? And all of these are ways that we can, or that are used to feel more comfortable and to strategically plan how we can interact with a more dominant culture when we do so. Intercultural communication occurs when members of two or more cultures or co-cultures even when they exchange messages in a manner that's influenced by their different cultural perceptions and their symbol systems, both the verbal and the nonverbal. All of us belong to many groups. Just because we are uh, identifying ourselves as one group and part of another group, that's fine. But when we go to communicate across these cultures and interculturally, just because we are speaking with somebody from a different culture does not mean we are engaging in intercultural communication. One way to look at this is uh, Gutekunst's model in 2005 that shows a 2 by 2 matrix here of interpersonal and intercultural factors. This model just shows how some interpersonal transactions have no intercultural elements, but other encounters do, and some have more and some have less. When a English speaking person calls a directory assistance, when they request a English speaker from a non-English speaking operator, this has low intercultural significance. It also has low interpersonal significance. But over here, in the high intercultural significance, a traveler violates customs of a culture that they didn't understand when visiting a country. And so if you take some of these ideas, a parent and child, and they're discussing their changing relationship, that is very interpersonal. It's a very interpersonal interaction, but it is not at all a intercultural. There is no intercultural significance. Maybe when two spouses from different cultural backgrounds come together, they experience moments of high interpersonal significance as well as high intercultural significance. This difference in cultural background for a married couple might not be that big of an issue until things start to happen and develop, i.e., having a baby, getting married. What religion should we follow? How should we approach life and school and education and work and gender roles and all of these things that need to be communicated in a marriage that can be different and influenced via culture. Now, some of the cultures that we can talk about are more of just, I guess, behaviors that happen within a dominant culture, right? And so when we're talking about this next slide with cultural values and norms, there are some subtle but different factors that uh, can be seen if we could generalize other countries. Now, careful not to overgeneralize these things because there are obviously um, people who fall into these cultures that do not follow these cultural values and these cultural norms that we're about to discuss. And the first one that we're going to discuss is a high context versus low context culture. A high context culture relies very heavily on the subtle and nonverbal cues to maintain social harmony. These communicators pay attention to the relationships of each other, the social rules that are governed or that do govern different interactions. A lot of what is said is not directly said. A lot of what is said is subtle and within the meaning surrounding the situation or the conversation, as opposed to a low context culture where low context cultures they express thoughts and feelings and ideas as directly as possible. It is in the words that these cultures tend to communicate. Examples of high context and low context cultures. High context cultures, most Asian, Middle Eastern, Latin American, and Southern European countries have a high context approach to communication and interaction. Low context cultures include cultures such as the United States, Canada, some Northern European countries. What these communicators like out of each, the high context communicators like the ambiguity, the use of silence. In the low context cultures, they like clear, direct speech. The next one we look at is individualistic versus collectivistic culture. Individualistic culture, these members in this culture view their primary responsibility as helping themselves. But collectivistic cultures and members of that culture, they feel loyalty and obligation to the groups and the extended families. To graduate high school in an individualistic culture, one might celebrate their own achievement in graduating high school. In a collective culture, one might celebrate being successful in school to bring honor to the family, or to not let the family down, or to better position the family. Right? Everything is more focused on the collective group versus the uh, smaller group, i.e., ourself. Some scholars find this to be the most telling value, dimension of individualistic versus collectivistic. This could be the most important uh, in understanding a culture and how a culture will respond in many situations. Now, low versus high power distance cultures. A low power distance culture, these are cultures where we believe, or low power distance cultures believe that there is no big distinction between various social classes. Rich and poor and educated and uneducated groups, they do still exist, but in low power cultures, they're not that big of a difference. And the pervasive belief that one person is as valuable as another is present. In high power distance cultures, the opposite is true. These countries see that there is a separation in power, and that separation in power is okay. It's to be accepted, it's to be anticipated and expected. In countries with higher degrees of power distance, employees have much less input into the way that they perform their work. In fact, workers from these cultures are even likely to feel apprehensive when given freedom to make their own decisions. Uncertainty avoidance. Uncertainty avoidance is the way that we feel about uncertain situations. Basically, how dis- how uncomfortable is it, or how threatening is it when you're in an ambiguous situation? This is will tell you, or the answer to that question will tell you where that culture lies on a UAI index, which is the uncertainty avoidance index. In cultures with high uncertainty avoidance, people who kind of go against the grain are generally considered dangerous. Maybe they're intolerant, and ethnocentrism seems high. In achievement versus nurturing, the term achievement culture describes societies that place a high value on material success. They focus on the task that's in front of them. But a nurturing culture regards the support of relationships as the important goal. That is what is important in a nurturing culture. Now, none of these cultures can signify good versus bad or right versus wrong. It's just culture, and culture is different everywhere we go. And these are the important things I want you to take from this chapter. And I want you to sit and think about, what cultures do you identify with? What co-cultures do you identify with? And how much weight do you put on those identifying characteristics? And just because you agree or identify with one culture, you can identify with more than one culture, more than one cultural group, more than one co-culture. This is what is called intersectionality. And if you look at your intersectionality and decide, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about the way that your intersectionality is described? For me, middle-aged, white man, live in America, married to a Mexican woman, have kids who are obviously biracial, um, to a certain extent. How do I feel about being a father, being a military veteran? All of these things are different cultures that I belong in. How do I feel about that? Those are questions that I want you to ask yourself as you contemplate what intercultural communication means in an interpersonal setting.